Hello, I'm Mystic Orange and this is video hashtag 670. So in this video I'm reviewing 16 season 1 episode 19. It's called The Swami. Anyway, in this episode Josie gets a new job as being the manager of the Swami and Jude becomes his apprentice. Anyway, before we get into this video, make sure to like, share and subscribe and let's get into it. Anyway, for the first scene of the episode, we get, Caitlin at the lemon. She has lots of customers, trying to get lemonade from her. And it's a complete rush hour. There's so many customers here, it's very busy. It's just too much for Caitlin to handle, and they're just being rude. So I can understand Caitlin's frustration here. And at that point, Caitlin just can't take it anymore. There's just too many demanding customers, yelling at her. So she has no other options than shutting down the lemon. And you know what? I'm on her side for this. If you want lemonade so badly, just, make your own. Honestly, customers can be really impolite sometimes. I think if you're a customer, it's really important, to make a queue. And then, each customer gets served one by one. And if you're not happy with the service, you can just leave. And a few moments later, while Kaylin is still inside the lemon, the customers leave. And while Kaylin's in the lemon, Nikki is sitting outside the lemon. And it seems like Nikki's, reading a teen magazine, which I think is odd. I don't think Nikki would be into, teen magazines, based on our past, reviews. Anyway, Kaylin starts ranting about her life, and Nikki starts leaving the area as soon as Kaylin starts talking about the color pink. I think this just makes Nikki a bad friend. And then Caitlin declares if anyone calls her miss one more time, she's gonna lose it. And then a cute guy calls her miss. And Caitlin almost lost it as soon as she turned around. And thus, Caitlin falls for another guy in the show. I think this is the longest time ever that Caitlin has been without a boy. At least for once. I think the last time, Caitlin, had a date with another guy is a few episodes back in, Valentine's Day. But this was just Jen and Caitlin, looking for boys, just to date with them. And, they end the, episode with, including Nikki dating with fake Jonesy. But that was barely, meaningful. But the last proper boyfriend Caitlin had is in episode 6, the Sushi Connection. It's where he was, dating, that guy, Kyle Donaldson. So in season 1, Caitlin has dated less boys compared to the other seasons. And by comparison, I bet Jan, dated more boys than her. At least for season 1 anyways. After that, we get the theme song, and that means we now have an intermission. And for this intermission, we get another Q&A question. And this question seems to be tailored to 16. And the question is, if you had a job in 16, which job would you have? And if you want to, you can answer the question in the comments down below. So what would my answer be? And for this question, I think I'm going to focus on the jobs I've covered in my channel. So those are the jobs from episode 1 to episode 18. Since episode 18 is the last, episode that I covered. And from those episodes, which job would I choose? If you must know, I created YouTube shorts out of the 16 jobs, so this kind of helped me in this. Make sure to check those out. They are really fun. So I kind of looked back at all of the YouTube shorts I made for the 16 jobs. And I have come to a decision. I think the job that I would have is secret shopper. This is the job that Jonesy had in episode 9 called Employee of the Month. This is where Jonesy goes around stores and reviews their service. I personally think this job will be perfect for me. I mean, the goal of this, job is to review things. And guess what my channel is? Is a review channel. I mean, I can't think of anything more perfect than, this job. And also you get paid for this. So, it's kind of fun. And personally, if I was a secret shopper in 16, I would have lots of fun with it. Jonesy certainly did. How about you guys? Would you want to be a secret shopper in 16? Or what other jobs would you want in 16? Anyway, now the intermission is over, let's get back into this review. Anyway, after this theme song, Kaylin just did a terrible mistake. It was also a hilarious mistake as well as an awkward mistake, but overall it was a hilarious mistake. So Kaylin thought this guy was going to ask her out, but all he wanted is, order the lemonade. And she kind of spent her time wasting his time. So he ends up being late to his work. Kaylin really has to call herself Les Miss Unlucky. One bad thing seems to happen after another. And soon later, Jonesy comes into the lemon, announcing his new job. So according to him, he has a new gig at the mall. I guess, he kind of manages entertainment. So you could say like his job here is the manager of the Swami, which is basically what he's hosting. I wonder who let him, host this. Like, did he host it himself or did someone else let him do it? And Kayla noticed the flyers that, Jonesy put in her lemon. And she really seemed to be invested in the Swami thing. I mean, I can see her point of view though. Especially in this episode today, she seems to go after disaster. So I kind of, understand her point of view, like needing advice from other people. Like she needs someone to, saw her life around. And honestly, like if I was Kaylin, I wouldn't need advice from the Swami. I mean, the only people who I can think of gives Caitlyn the best advice are her friends, especially Jen. And honestly, I don't think Caitlyn needs advice just to make her life go around. Like sometimes life sucks, and that's how you live with it. And honestly, like most of her, disaster seems to be, related to her job. So if any advice needs to be given, it needs to be about that. And the fact, she seems to have disaster with this cute guy. And honestly, like if you are a person, who needs advice, it's because you don't know what to do. And I don't think Caitlyn doesn't know what to do. It's just that life sucks. But if I had to give Caitlyn any advice, I would say take a break from work. And why it mentions how this gig is a scam, advice like that, can't make your life better. I mean, I kind of see his point of view because essentially Caitlyn's going to have to pay for the Swami thing. She's paying someone to give her advice. It's kind of like those people who can see the future, apparently. And there are known people, who used to scam a lot of people doing that. I mean, I remember watching YouTube, videos of people reacting to scam artists, giving people weird advices. But thing is, things like that, you don't have to pay to watch those gigs. I mean, there's plenty of videos in YouTube where you can really watch these things, like people giving you advice on what to do in your life. You can also search the internet of, the things you want to do, or speak to a therapist. which seems like what Caitlyn needs. I mean, to be fair, like this show did appear around like 2004, and I don't think like internet was as big back then. So like advice wasn't like readily available on the internet. So I can imagine like back then, like a lot of scams have happened with people giving people advice and taking people's money. Anyway, back at the entertainment section, Josie seems to have a dilemma with the Swami Bindi. The Swami is too depressed to get out of his hotel room. And there are a lot of people waiting outside in the chairs, waiting for people to, take advice from him. I can't believe like there are people who are paying to watch, this guy give advice to other people. Like this is some entertainment here. Like I know a lot of people, have entertainment like circus or magicians, but this is something interesting to me. And behind the curtain, Jude comes in to meet Jonesy. And I just love Jude's antic in this scenario. So Jonesy kind of runs towards Jude about like, how Swami Bindi has, bailed on him. And I just love Jude's response towards all this. Like he says, like, look at the bright side. He still likes Jonesy. And I found this like really cute and funny. And this kind of hints at, Jude being bi. It really emphasizes the romance between Jonesy and Jude. And I find this really wholesome. And Jonesy mentions like how he can't believe that, Swami Bindi punked out on him. And then Jude responds, only punks get punked, dude. But you kind of have to think about what Jude said here. Like you can think positively and think like, Jude is being nice to Jonesy, but you can think multiple ways with this, phrase. Only punks get punked. Like this could imply that, Swami Bindi didn't punk out on Jonesy. However, if you think about this negatively, Jude is basically calling Jonesy a punk. I just found this really interesting. And then Jonesy kind of asks himself like interesting question. Like aren't spiritual dudes aren't supposed to be bound to do bad things like cancelling appearances? And this makes me think Jonesy is like confused about spiritual people. The key here is that spiritual people aren't bound to anything. That's what makes them spiritual. And I think to spiritual people, there's no such thing as good or bad. Because good and bad is subjective. And Jonesy is the one who thinks that, cancelling appearances is bad. So that's kind of his perspective. So in his point of view, that's a bad thing. But to other people, that might not be a bad thing. And I think for some spiritual people, you don't have obligations to anything. And then Jude responds by saying, nobody is perfect. And I think what Jude said here is really interesting. And I think, what Jude said here can be interpreted in many ways. I mean, first, yes, it's kind of true, like, nobody is perfect. We all have flaws. This, could reflect to everyone else. Like, everyone has flaws. Who doesn't have flaws? And this made me think of like multiple videos where people would chat to Boybot or EVBot back in the day. And this made me think of the phrase, nobody's perfect, therefore I am nobody. And you kind of have to question, who is nobody? Are you nobody? And you kind of have to ask yourself, are you nobody? We're somebody, aren't we? And if you think of the phrase like, nobody's perfect, therefore I am nobody, that would imply that nobody is perfect. Like if you, identify yourself as someone who is nobody, then you therefore, identify yourself as perfect. If nobody is perfect, does that mean everybody is perfect? I'm sorry to add confusion here about this one phrase, but that's essentially, what's happening here. You kind of have to like get into wordplay if you're like want to focus about this phrase. By the way, this concept is called syllogism. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. Okay, but even I didn't understand what Jude said here. I mean, you can read what Jude said here, right? And this bit's kind of funny because while Jonesy is, trying to rant and think about like someone to, pretend to be Swami, uh, inadvertently Jude just gives random advice. Like every word Jude said was like stupid. Well, I can't say it's stupid. It's definitely like thought provoking. It's thought provoking and random, not stupid. And I like what Jude said here. It's so random and off the cuff. He mentions how like gerbils and hamsters can't make babies together, but they both like lettuce. And I thought that was really hilarious and funny thing he just said. I mean, that's just Jude being Jude. I mean, it's interesting to think about because both gerbils and hamsters are both rodents. However, like, they're a different breed. So obviously, I don't think, gerbils and hamsters would, make babies together. But there are animals, can interbreed with each other to make a hybrid. Like, for example, a lion and a tiger makes a tigon or a liger. It's like you have to ask yourself, can a human and a gorilla make a baby with each other? It's not something you think about, but Jude, randomly thinks about this. But you know what? Jude seemed like my kind of guy. Because, this is kind of something what I would do. Like, just say the random shit ever. Like, what you don't know about me is like, I'm INTP. And I don't think like Jude is INTP, I think he's an ISFP. And what's common between both of our type is that we're both introverted, but we're also like perceiving. And the point of being a perceiver is like being random. And to be honest, with that, personality of Jude, I think I would get along with him in real life. And after all the random shit Jude just said, Jonesy brain starts to click. He just figured out who can, replace Swami Bindi. And it's Jude Lazowski. And Jonesy, really convinces Jude to be Swami Jude. And he mentions that, he's going to owe Jude a big time. So that means, he's going to pay him a lot for this. I mean, if I was Jude, I would accept this because, like, he's giving me money for this. I mean, Jonesy would better pay me for this. Like, could you imagine, like, Jude doing this and he's not getting the money for it? So, essentially, though, this would mean, like, this is Jude's third job, being assistant of, Jonesy. So, we have it, Jude becomes the Swami. So, we have Jude being the Swami and Jonesy being the manager of the Swami. That's their jobs here. So literally this means that Jude's third job is, being a Swami. And it's the third job we have before we get to like his, sticky job being, fired. Okay, whatever, I'm counting it anyway. Anyway, sitting outside we have Nikki, Kaylin and Jen. And Nikki is hoping nobody sees her. I think in her perspective, being around this place, makes people stupid. Like only the people who are desperate would want advice from the Swami. So it's kind of a way like she doesn't want to lose her credibility by being here. And Kaylin explains like she's kind of the hottest motivational speaker ever. And that's my issue here. He's a motivational speaker. And I've always had problem with motivational speakers. In my opinion, none of them are good. And Jen kind of makes a good point. So yes, like Kaden, life hasn't gone, right. Like, can't Kayla think anything for herself? And that's kind of my pet peeve with most people in this world, that they don't think for themselves. I do think what Nikki said here was both funny and hilarious, but it was also kind of mean. She said, like, oh, Kaylin is too busy, matching her skirt with her shoes. But also, this is kind of, showing Nikki's, side that I don't like. It's kind of showing her problematic side. It kind of perpetuates some stereotypes that she kind of holds on to. First of all, she obviously, this is kind of obvious that Nikki thinks Caitlyn is stupid, and she kind of in a way is saying like Caitlyn doing these obvious feminine things equates to being stupid. So what really is happening here is like Nikki in essence is devaluing like femininity. Like it kind of suggests like, oh, Kayla matching her skirt to her shoes is considered in like inferior and undesirable. And imagine paying $5 just for the Swami thing. I think it's hilarious how Jonesy addresses the audiences. Instead of calling them, ladies and gentlemen, Jonesy goes for like insulting route, calling them liars, cheaters, lazy people, and losers of all shapes and sizes. And then Kaylin asks which one is she. And to answer your question, Caitlin, I think you're the loser of all shapes and sizes. Being that you're so desperate to, need advice from a Swami. And I love the music that accompanies with Jude here. It just emphasizes the absurdity. I just love the girls' reaction to all of this. It's super funny, especially Nikki and Jen. Because, like, Jen and Kaylin are both against this. So anyway, as Jude gets up in the stage, he kind of makes an excuse how, like, Swami Bindi didn't make it today. And his excuse is really bonkers. He mentioned how, like, Swami Bindi fell on his chakra, which I don't think is a thing. So apparently, like, Jude is gonna fill in for him because he is, Swami Bindi's appendage. He was meant to say apprentice, but he ended up saying appendage, which was really hilarious. I found this bit really funny. I'm pretty sure appendage is like an animal body part, which, adds to the humor. As a kid, I used to find this bit really funny. And then the audience yell at Jude to get off the stage, especially Nikki. It's another thing I find funny about the scene. Anyway, Coach Halder interjects his commentary, and he says like the skateboard park is in the back. I think this is fitting because, Jude likes skateboarding. And then Jude kind of responds to, Coach Halder's statement in a very unique way. Jude says, life is like a skateboard park, and the do's and dudettes are merely skaters. This kind of references William Shakespeare's play called As You Like It, where in the play it says, the world is a stage and the men and women are merely players. And I bet the audience are confused by, Jude's statement here. They're either, taking it literally or aren't that right themselves. And you're probably wondering how does that relate to what Coach Halder said here. But if you really had to think about it, if what you think really deeply, Coach Halder says like the, skateboard park is in the back, right? And Jude is saying that, life is like a skateboard park. So in a way, if you think about it, Jude is saying, everyone should be outside. And he's kind of referring the audience as skaters. And in a way, Jude is saying everyone should go out in the back. You see, I can interpret Jude. He can't confuse me. And then Kaylin is so amazed by Jude's words of wisdom. And then her friends Nikki and Caitlin can't help but eye roll at the situation. And then Jude makes more references. He references Keanu Reeves and Alicia Cuthbert. Unfortunately, I do not know who Alicia is, but I do know Keanu Reeves. Like I know Keanu Reeves' favorite line, "You're breathtaking." And then Caitlin really related to what Jude said here. It's possible that, Caitlin related to what G said about Alicia Cuthbert. Maybe she's a huge fan of her. And I have to be honest, I know nothing about Alicia Cuthbert. And I looked her up, she seemed to be a lady with blonde hair. I guess that's what Caitlin connects with. They're both blonde. And then Coach Holder related to what Jude said for the second time about hairy, aggressive people who are ugly enough to be character actors. And Nikki heard the words that Caitlin said that she would not have thought about. She uttered the words, "Did you know that he was so smart?" referring to Jude as being so smart. And then Jonesy calls out to the audience to step up one by one to ask Jude some questions. And Julie is the first person to ask her question. How can she get a better job? Just so you know, Julie works at Wonder Tacos. I mean, doesn't she own Wonder Tacos? And then, Jude gives like confusing advice. He says to Julie to think positive. Like, think like a hole. Like, think like a donut with a hole in it. And Nikki and Jen are probably thinking, like, how does this make any sense? But it seemed to, make sense to Julie. And, she takes it literally. She ends up, thinking about, taking a job at, Krispy Kreme donuts. I actually couldn't hear what, Julie said with her lisp. But, she would rather work at a donut company than a taco company. I mean, what's wrong with working at Wonder Tacos? And then Carson comes up to ask Jude a question. He asks Jude, how can I let chicks dig me? Which I'm surprised that he is asking this question. Isn't everyone into Carson? Like, didn't we have an episode where, Jen is falling in love with him? And yet again, Jude gives an interesting advice. He says to Carson, try laying low like the dirt. Somewhere along that lines. I don't think I fully quoted him. And, these guys take these advices really literally. Like, Jude, tells, Carson to be dirty. And then Carson, takes that, not taking baths every day. But, if you really need to think about this question and the advice that, Jude gave, Carson asks, how can I let chicks dig me? And you kind of have to think broadly about this question. You can't just go, oh, how can I let chicks dig me? How can I let anyone dig me? And again, with this question, you have to think deep. If you want people to dig you, you need to think of the objective. You're comparing everyone to a digger, or, people who dig things. I mean this like literal digging. And this kind of relates to what Jude said. And guess what, where people dig? People dig underground. And Jude is literally kind of saying, like, Carson, think like the ground. So in this analogy, the people are the diggers and Carson is the ground. And, you kind of have to think about the qualities that ground has. I mean, the word ground, has that, word in it. Grounded. What this really means, Carson needs to remain grounded and down to earth in reality. So if Carson remains grounded and down to earth, people will dig him, especially chicks. And I think people need a reason to dig you. Similar to how diggers need reason to dig the ground. And there are many reasons why people might, dig the ground. The popular thing is, dig the ground to, find treasure. So basically, Carson should have that within himself. So while he remains grounded and down to earth, within himself, he should, have all his qualities. Maybe have, a little bit of mystery within himself that, will capture people to, dig within him. That's how I interpret both Carson's question and, Jude's answer. And then Coach Holder comes up, and this bit is really interesting. So Coach Holder wants to open up to, other people in his life. He wants other people to know his real self, being a caring person within himself. And then Jude just bursts out complete random advice, which made no sense even to me. I can make sense of Jude's second advice, I can't make sense with this one. And just like everyone else, Coach Holder takes this really literally. The creepy music plays and Coach Holder rips out his shirt, showing off his hairy back. And everyone is repulsed by his hairy back. And then he goes off, skipping off in the sunset with, being half naked. And then Nikki comes up to ask her a question, and it's really funny. She asked Jude, "Didn't I see you working out this ticket?" And then Ron comes up to, take her off the stage because she was about to interrogate Jude. I mean, no one's going to fool here. Like, everyone knows that that's Jude. But it's super funny that Nikki asked this question. And now it's Caitlin's turn to get up to ask a question. So with Caitlin's dilemma, she has a problem with her crush. Like, he doesn't even know that Caitlin is alive. What should she do? And this time Jude kind of gives like a really good advice. Good is an asterisk. But I think, the advice was really straightforward. So the guy doesn't know that Caitlin isn't alive. So all Caitlin has to do is go up and tell him that she is alive. I mean, I can't think of any better advice than that. Can you? So back at the backstage, Jude kind of gives, Josie some ideas of, some advice, to put in the laptop. So Jude kind of brainstorms a lot of ideas. So the first advice, he brainstorms with Josie is always smell something before you bite it. I personally would not follow this advice if I were you. I'm sure Jude is talking about food, but even then I still think you can't take this advice. For one thing, smell doesn't translate to your food. I think it's, heavily known, like, if something smells good, it tastes good, but that's not always the case. For example, like something that, smells good can taste bad. Well, for example, you can't, taste a perfume, right? Because, perfume is toxic to humans when they consume it. However, in the similar vein, something might smell bad but might taste good. And there are a lot of foods that are, smell bad. That things that have like strong odor. Like, for example, cheese and tuna, most fish, eggs. They are kind of like strongly, smelling. And for his second advice, he suggests when confronted by change, always carry a change purse. And this seems really specific. I think Josie prompted this advice. And I think when he meant change, I don't think he meant as in money. But even if he did, why carry a change purse? Why not have just a purse? And then Jude's final advice was don't stick your hand inside a pony's mouth. And even Josie found this weird. If I had to say, out of the advice, this is the best advice. Like, don't stick your hand inside a pony's mouth. Like, you don't want your hands bitten off. I think no truer words has been said. I think most of the advice Jude gives in this episode can be stuck in a t-shirt. Like, life lesson learned, don't stick your hand inside a pony's mouth. I hope you learned that, viewers. And then we have Jen and Nikki discuss with each other about how none of the advice made sense. And they're kind of worried about Caitlyn. I gotta say, I do appreciate, Jen and Nikki supporting Caitlyn. Even though their personalities are different, they are looking out for their best friends. I would say, like, Jen is more likely to look out for her best friend. Nikki is doing that, but is also being dismissive at the same time, like calling Caitlyn stupid. So she's kind of helping, but also not helping at the same time. Also, I just love this interaction between Caitlyn and Coach Holder, especially coming from Coach Holder. Usually, I don't like this guy for being so sexist, but I love this interaction between him and Caitlyn. It's so cute and heartwarming. It's kind of showing, Coach Holder's softer side. Even though there's no connection between Caitlyn and Coach Holder, this kind of gives like a fatherly daughter vibe. At least just for once in their lives. It just makes my heart flutter. I also love this exchange between Jen and Nikki. Because Jen states Nikki enjoys being right. And Nikki responds by saying that's true. At least Nikki's modest, I can give her that. Okay, but this bit made me laugh as a kid really hard. It's just, Ron the Rent-A-Cop chasing after Coach Holder. And it's just what Ron says that makes me laugh. It's just him chasing after a big hairy man. I mean, Coach Holder didn't do anything wrong either. It's just him running around with his hairy chest. This isn't, I don't think, indecent exposure because, he's not flashing anything like, suggestive. Also, I am really impressed about how Caitlyn handles this interaction with Jeff. She really shows assertion in this scenario about asking him out, and that's what I do appreciate about this. So, for instance, Jude did give her good advice here. Like, sometimes you have to, take the charge. So, you got to appreciate Caitlyn's confidence. Like, you're telling this guy to go out with you. It's not a request, it's a demand. And it's kind of like saying, I'm not taking a no for my answer. I'm glad that, Caitlyn has took this risk. Because it did pay off. Jeff accepted. And even when it comes to time and place, Caitlyn took control of that as well. So while Jeff was about to say to, next weekend or whatever, Caitlyn's like, no, she's gonna have the date, today at 8 o'clock. And that restaurant place is at El Sparto's. And another scene I love. So in here, Jen and Nikki kind of break the fourth wall. Like Nikki says to Jen, good thing this isn't a TV show. Because if it was, everything would go wrong after the commercial break. And with what Nikki said here, you can interpret it in many ways. Like in universe, this is suggesting this isn't a TV show, it's real life, in the 16 universe obviously. But to us viewers, this is a TV show. And there's something that you need to know about this information. After this scene, we do get a commercial break. This might not be obvious if you're on watching it on YouTube, but when I was a kid, most TV shows would have commercial breaks in between. I think this is pretty common in places like UK, Canada, or USA. This was common in the UK. So when you had this line after this, there was a commercial break. So in a way, this line, breaks the fourth wall. And I think it's pretty clever. Anyway, in the next scene, we're at Spin This. And Wyatt is given a task to change the letters up in the sign. He has to climb the ladder to do it, but he's afraid of heights. But I don't get this. Isn't the sign supposed to be the name of the star? And the name of the star is Spin This. So what does he mean he has to change the letters? Like, are they changing the font of the sign? Anyway, Caitlin comes along to motivate Wyatt to get up. And then she starts quoting the Swami. She says, "A fear is like a goldfish. If you feed it, it grows bigger. And when it dies, you won't be able to flush it down the toilet." Also, I don't get how, fear is like a goldfish. That part didn't get explained. So, in this scenario, Caitlin and particularly Jude is comparing fear to goldfish. And obviously, goldfish gets fed. But how do you feed your fears? Because obviously the food for the goldfish is obviously fish food. But what's the food for the fear? So I can't understand why that wouldn't make any sense. I also love this between Kirsten and Kristen. They're just quoting, Swami Jude, also while referencing Keanu Reeves. And Kristen starts folding the t-shirts like Keanu Reeves would. Not that Keanu Reeves ever folds t-shirts. And in the next scene, Jude makes another statement. Like Jude says, always eat a hot dog on one end or the other. The middle is not an option. I mean, I don't know, guys. Have you tried eating a hot dog in the middle? Like, eat the hot dog in the middle, but leave out the ends. And then in the next scene, Carson and this chubby guy starts making fun of Wyatt for, climbing up the ladder and, being so scared. I mean, how cruel can some people be? And I wouldn't expect this from Carson, You'd think a person like Carson would be like into the hot girls. You wouldn't expect like a nasty attitude from him. Also, what's so funny about someone falling off a ladder? Like, do they want Wyatt to be badly injured? Anyway, while Caitlin and Jeff are on their date, they start to talk to each other. And Jeff wonders what college Caitlin is going to. And while reading the notes that, Swami Jude gave Caitlin, she responds by saying the smaller, heavier one. I mean, Caitlin isn't that much of an idiot. She should know how to respond to this. Like, she shouldn't have to rely on Jude's advice on the paper anyway. It's like saying Caitlin has never talked to another person before. Seriously, people can be so cruel, and Stanley joins in to bully Wyatt. But thing is, this happens in real life. Like, people can be so sick. Like, to them, people getting hurt is funny to them. And then Nikki comes along to help out Wyatt. And she finds out the truth about how, Swami Jude influenced all of this. So anyway, Kaylin and Jeff decide what to eat. Kaylin was about to buy a burrito, but apparently that shows, her being closed off to new ideas. And I'm like, just buy a burrito, man. Like, Jeff doesn't really care. In the end, though, like, Kaylin orders herself a taco salad. I mean, was that worth the trouble? I bet Jeff really cares about what Kaylin is, saying to him. Just act natural. And literally, I don't think Jeff is bothered by the date. If Caitlin, started acting normally. Anyway, Jude shares more word of wisdom. He says monkeys are just like us, but only dumber, so be nice to them. In a way, he is saying be nice to dumb people. Anyway, Caitlin drags Jude into her date so that he can, feed her some lines. This is probably my favorite bit of the episode. It's so hilarious. So Jeff was wondering where Caitlin was, and she just made the excuse that she needed a call. And then Jeff simply asked, was it an emergency? And if I was Caitlin, I could have just said, oh, I was calling someone, like her friend or something. Like, she didn't need a line from Jude for this. But it was really funny what, Jude said to Caitlin to say to Jeff. And it had nothing to do with what Jeff asked her. Like, she says, emergency are like pantsuits. No one looks good in them. And like you're wondering how that relates to what Jeff is asking her. It doesn't. I had to look up what pantsuit is because I didn't know what Jude was saying. It's probably like a Canadian term. So I looked it up and it's just a suit. And then Jeff asked, what music Caitlin likes. And this bit is really hilarious. She ends up saying to Jeff, oh, she likes it loud and radical, dude. Like she uses the word dude. I mean, I don't care. I like this bit. And I'm glad that Jude fed this line. And to be honest, like if Kayla was going to be honest about what her favorite music would be, it's obviously going to be like dog toy or like boy band style music. She's into that, which isn't a bad thing either. But I'm glad she gets to be like out and about with her personality, even though it's forced into her. I think with Jude, it just brings out Caitlyn's, radical side to her. And then we have it. This bit takes the cake. So while Jeff asks, does Caitlyn enjoy working at the Lemon? Because obviously she doesn't. While this is happening, behind the scenes, Nikki's coming up to Jude and she kind of, pulls out Jude's underwear. And while that's happening, Jude is screaming, "You're giving me a wedgie, dude." I'm surprised that Jeff couldn't hear that. But Caitlin hears this and she blurts out to Jeff, "You're giving me a wedgie, dude." I don't give a shit. This is the most hilarious bit of the episode. Even to this day, I still laugh at this bit. I think this is probably one of my favorite comedic lines, like comedic tropes. This reminds me back in like episode 11 called Fake Date, where Jonesy would feed lines to Jan and she would say the wrong thing. And it never gets old to me. Like, could you imagine the scenario if this was real life and someone's like on your date, they're asking you questions, and at the middle of it, you just scream out, like, "You're giving me a wedgie, dude." I think this stuff would make me laugh. When everything goes wrong, Jeff was about to leave, but finally Kaylin tried to explain herself about what has been going on. And Jeff kind of understands. And at the end of the day, their day goes well. In the next scene, we're back at Spin This, where Wyatt is still up in the ladder. And then Ron the Rent-A-Cop comes in. And he gives us some insight about him being in the war and explaining that in the war he ate ladders like that for breakfast. In this show, Ron the Rent-A-Cop always references the war. And if you must know, like the war happened around like 1950s at the latest. I'm no historian, that's what I'm guessing. At this point, like Ron the Rent-A-Cop must be really old. Like in the show, he's is assumed being old, but like when I look at him physically, he doesn't look all that old. Like we do get old characters in the show, like we see it all the time, but he doesn't look as much older than them. If Ron existed today, he's probably dead right now. Or at best, right now, Ron is probably at a retirement home. I love it when Nikki just punches Ron in the stomach. Just, casually punching a Rent-A-Cop. I will say though, Nikki has guts. Zip it or lose it. I like that line. I do like Nikki is trying to hold people accountable. No matter if it's the bullies, Ron the Rent-A-Cop, Jonesy or Jude, she stands her ground. So anyway, Nikki, tells Jude to, use his wisdom to get Wyatt down. So Jude goes for it, and he tells Wyatt, "Make it like a disco and come down tonight." And with advice like that, like Wyatt, was like, "Yeah, I'm not going out down like that." Because what advice is that? And it just shows like Jude's advice may be, sound. They aren't good for practice. And just for that, everyone escapes. They see the flaw what Swami Jude is. and the fact that they can't trust this. And Nikki is the true hero in the story here, as she found out how to get Wyatt down by making Wyatt angry. Because Wyatt starts, suggesting he should listen to Jumping Snail album while he's stuck up in the ladder. And then, Nikki starts a debate about how, the band is kind of terrible. And Wyatt, being appalled by this, really wants this debate with Nikki. So, he comes down without thinking. He knew you can save someone just by, making them angry. But if I was stuck up in the ladder, the last thing I'll be thinking about, starting a debate with someone. I wouldn't have the courage to even talk to anyone. Like, I can see it right now. If I was stuck in the ladder, like, my ears will not focus on anything else but my own mind. There will be people like come back down from the, like they will be screaming for help or something. Like, my brain will be full with anxiety. So I don't think this tactic will work on me. Also, back at Kayla's date, Jen goes up to check on her. And while that's happening, I think Jeff and Caitlin are having banter with each other. They're kind of having a laugh. And while they're chatting, Caitlin kind of references like a past episode. It's the episode where Jonesy flashed his buttocks around Albatross and Finch. I thought that was a unique episode connection there. Also, speaking of an episode connection, and I forgot to mention this, Kaylee seems to wear the pink dress she wore at the Sushi Connection. When she was dating Kyle Donaldson. In most dates, she's wearing the same pink dress. Also, near the escalator, Jude teaches Kirsten and Kristen how to skateboard down the escalator. And it really goes horribly for them, but also hilariously. Also, I wonder how Josie got fired. Isn't he the manager of the Swami? Maybe someone from the Galleria Mall, fired him from, hosting entertainments. That could be it. So would that mean, Josie gets fired from all the entertainments he hosts? I can't remember if he, hosts another entertainment in the future. Because if he does, I think this is like a part, continuity. Also, if Josie is getting fired, that means Jude is also getting fired from being a Swami. Because, he's tied to Josie and he's not getting the money either. Don't worry, I'll make a YouTube shot for both of them. Also, it didn't work out for you, Caitlin. You almost lost the day because of Jude. It worked out for you in the end because there was no Jude helping you. Anyway, the episode ends with Kirsten and Kristen yelling at Jude, for, getting hurt from the escalator. So if the episode ends, this means the review ends. Okay, since that's over, it's time to give you my favorite and my least favorite part about this episode. I don't have that many things I dislike about this episode, but my least favorite part about this episode, well, it's more towards the start of the episode. In general, I don't like how, this episode or the show kind of dismisses feminine things, especially coming from, Nikki. Like, for example, like Nikki ditches Caitlin because, she mentions the color pink. And then she kind of equates, Caitlin matching her skirt to her shoes as being, like, non-intelligent. It's kind of aside from Nikki I don't like that much. However, when it comes to my favorite part about this episode, there's so many things to choose from because this episode was, bang on hilarious. But from all the hilarious moments of the show, I can, point out my favorite part about this episode. And it's in, like, Caitlin's date where, like, Jude is trying to feed Caitlin's line. And my favorite line of them all is when, like, Caitlin blurts out, "Oh, you're giving me a wedgie, dude." It's just so hilarious and so funny. I think this is like my favorite comedy trope ever. It's just the thought of like actual real person, like telling their date, they're giving them a wedgie when they're not. It's just I love that so much. Anyway, I guess my summary is over and my review is over. It's time to end this video now. I'm sorry if this video was too long for you. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you enjoyed about this episode. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and have a lovely day.